Okay, so you want to own an internet company. Run some cables, sign up your neighbors, collect a monthly check from everyone who needs Wi-Fi, which today is basically every household in the country. Here's the problem. In most American neighborhoods, there is only one company that can legally sell you internet through a wire. Not because nobody else wants in, because of a contract you have never seen, signed between your city and a company you have never met. A contract you have never seen. Hold on to that, because by the end of this video, that one sentence is going to explain almost everything about why your internet bill looks the way it does. Before making this video, I went through Comcast's actual 2025 filing with the SEC, a fiber industry cost report covering builds in 38 states, and the original 1980s cable law that still shapes who's allowed to sell you internet today. Most of what's in this video never makes it onto a tech blog, and by the end of it, you'll understand why almost nobody ever builds a second internet company in the same neighborhood as an existing one, why one of the richest companies on earth tried to break that pattern and quietly gave up, and one specific percentage buried in the middle of every internet company's business plan, that alone decides whether you end up with millions in profit or a network nobody signed up for. To understand any of that, you first need to see what you're actually paying for when you start this business. And it isn't the internet. There isn't one way to build an internet company. There are three, and picking between them is really picking how much of the ground beneath your city someone else already owns. At the small end, a fixed wireless setup beams internet from a tower to nearby rooftops instead of digging up streets. That can get off the ground for a few $100,000 in a small town, but it only works with a clear line of sight, and it loses badly the moment real fiber shows up nearby. In the middle sits a real regional fiber build-out, laying actual glass cable to homes in a mid-sized town, running into the tens of millions of dollars. Industry benchmarks from 2025 show burying fiber underground now costs more than double what it costs to string the same cable overhead on poles, and both numbers keep climbing because of labor, permitting delays, and what the industry calls make-ready work, moving everyone else's equipment out of your way before you're even allowed to start. At the top sits a national operator like Comcast or Charter, spending billions a year extending networks that already reach tens of millions of homes. Charter has publicly discussed a rural expansion priced at roughly $100 just to pass a single household before a single customer signs up. So the size you pick isn't really a business decision, it's a bet on how much of the map is already gone. Which brings us back to that contract you've never seen. Back in the 1980s, cities signed what are called franchise agreements with cable companies, in exchange for building out service to basically everyone in town, including the less profitable streets. The city granted the company the right to dig up public roads and string wire on public poles. For decades, many of those agreements were effectively exclusive. Congress technically banned brand new exclusive franchise deals in 1992, but the companies that got there first kept their networks, kept their pole rights, and kept their head start. Nobody has ever found it profitable to build a second full network directly on top of the first one in most towns. That contract you've never seen is the reason your neighborhood probably has one real internet choice instead of 5. Economists have a term for exactly this, and once you understand it, you'll never look at your internet bill the same way again. It's called a natural monopoly. A natural monopoly happens when the cost of building the first version of something is so enormous that building a second, competing version right next to it would cost almost as much as the first one did, while only splitting the same pool of customers in half. Think of it like a bridge over a river. The first company that builds a bridge spends a fortune, but once it's standing, everyone can drive across it for a small toll. It almost never makes sense for a second company to build an entirely separate bridge right next to it, just to fight over half the traffic. Whoever builds first owns the crossing. Once a company has already paid to trench every street in your neighborhood, a second company staring at the same streets is looking at spending those same tens of millions of dollars for a market that's already half or fully claimed. Whoever builds first owns the crossing, and in this business, almost nobody ever builds second. But owning that bridge doesn't mean nothing can go wrong. Two forces are working against anyone trying to build this business today. The first, your biggest costs are locked in before you've earned a single dollar. Comcast's own 2025 annual report shows the average customer relationship generates about $132 a month in revenue, but only around $53 a month becomes actual profit once the network trucks, technicians, and billing systems are paid for. That margin only becomes real once millions of dollars of buried cable are already sitting in the ground, whether or not customers show up on schedule. The second force is newer. Wireless carriers now sell home internet delivered entirely through the cell network. No digging required, and pricing data from 2026 shows that in neighborhoods where this option shows up, the existing cable company's prices measurably drop within about a year. The bridge that used to feel permanent is now being tested by a competitor who never has to touch a single road. Which brings us to what happens when even a company with unlimited money runs straight into that bridge and can't cross it any faster than anyone else. Meet Google. Not a scrappy startup, one of the wealthiest companies that has ever existed. In 2010, Google looked at the slow, unloved cable monopolies running American internet and decided to simply outbuild them, city by city under the name Google Fiber. For a few years, it worked exactly as planned, launching in Kansas City, then Austin, then Atlanta and Nashville, forcing existing cable companies there to upgrade their own networks just to keep up. Then, in October of 2016, Google's parent company Alphabet quietly hit pause. It halted expansion into 10 cities that had been in active talks, cut roughly 9% of the division's staff, over 100 people, and its CEO stepped down the same week. Alphabet's own earnings that quarter showed its experimental projects division losing over $850 million in 3 months. A company that could have outspent almost anyone on Earth ran straight into the real cost of digging up American streets one block at a time, and the math didn't move fast enough even for them. Whoever builds first owns the crossing. Even Google found out it wasn't first. So what does this actually look like on a real balance sheet? This is where that 1% I promised you finally shows up. Inside the industry, it's called the take rate, the share of homes you can actually reach that turn into paying customers. Get that number right and the business works. Get it wrong and you're stuck paying off a network nobody wanted. Let's run 2 realistic versions of your internet company and watch what that single percentage does to each one. Option 1. A small fixed wireless operator in an underserved rural county. Startup costs around $300,000 to $500,000 for towers and equipment. Sign up 1,500 customers at roughly $70 a month, and that's around $1.26 million a year in revenue. After maintenance, backhaul capacity, and a small staff, a well-run operator here can clear a net margin of 15 to 20%, putting real annual profit between $190,000 and $250,000. Option 2, a regional fiber build-out passing 20,000 homes in a mid-sized town. Startup cost, using current underground benchmarks, lands between $40 and $70 million depending on terrain and permitting delays. Reach a 30% take rate on those homes at $90 a month, and that's roughly $6.5 million a year in revenue, translating to $2.5 to $3 million a year in profit once the network is mature. Using Comcast's own margin structure as a guide. Drop that same take rate from 30% to 15% without changing a single dollar of what you spent building the network, and most of that profit disappears because the cables, the trucks, and the crews cost exactly the same whether one household signs up or 10. That's the whole business, sitting inside 1%. So here's the ownership verdict on an internet company. Capital intensity, 9 out of 10. Since even the cheapest version costs hundreds of thousands of dollars before your first customer, and the fiber version costs tens of millions. Regulatory and legal risk, 6 out of 10 because the franchise system isn't as brutal as it once was, but pole access and permitting can still stall a build-out for years. Margin stability, 8 out of 10 because once a network is built and customers are connected, the monthly revenue is remarkably steady. Structural moat, 9 out of 10 because as Google itself discovered, even a company with nearly unlimited money couldn't outbuild a network fast enough to matter. Overall ownership verdict, 7 out of 10. You're not really in the business of selling internet. You're in the business of owning the one piece of ground nobody else can afford to dig up next to you. Somewhere in your city hall right now, there's still a contract you've never seen between a company you've never met deciding what you pay every single month. Whoever builds first owns the crossing. You decide if you want to be the one holding the bridge. And if you don't have money, watch this video again.